Today I'll be refinishing a wood floor, and this one is probably put in maybe 20 years ago or more, and it's starting to show its age. So rather than sand the whole thing down, I've opted to just use a random orbital to just hit a few spots and just to touch it up a little bit. You want to try not to dig in too deep into the wood if you're doing this method. Kind of go around flat rather than at an angle, because you don't want to dig up the wood. So you also want to try to get any paint spots like this out. The sander can help you with that. But I'll be using polyurethane. This is has a capacity of about 800 square feet, the can says, so that should be plenty for the room that I'm doing today. And I have an oil-based brush to do the trim. Along the trim, this I'll just apply around the edge where I don't want to hit with my lamb's wool applicator, which is another important thing you want. And of course you want the stick that it goes in. And I have a little tray here to put the floor finish in, and I'm going to be wearing gloves too. And I also have all the windows in the room open to allow for ventilation. But before I do this, I'm going to be using this tack cloth just to go along the floor and pick up any loose sawdust that there might be from my sanding or that I might have missed when I vacuumed. So after I do that, I will then trim along the first edge. Probably I'll start in that corner and work my way out of the room. So I'll start there, and then I'll use my lamb's wool. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself or it'll become tacky along the edges, and it'll be a little harder when you then take the lamb's wool applicator and bump and overlap it. So just do a little bit at a time. So I'll stop here and come back shortly once I've started the trim. So I've started to do my cutting. This probably won't show up in video very well, but I'm going underneath the radiator covers, and I'm just pulling it out just a little bit so that I can then get my lamb's wool applicator and brush up against it without hitting my radiator cover. So I'm going to do that. I'm starting in the far corner of the room, and I'm going to pull all the way down into here and into the closets with this brush, and then I'll take my lamb's wool applicator and catch up to where I left off with the cutting. So I've started to apply the finish. Here you can see on this half, the side that has not had the poly put on, and this side has. And it makes quite a difference. I'm not trying to get this room to perfection, otherwise I would have sanded it all. But this is just a rental apartment that we're doing, and it's coming out pretty good. There's a few dry spots that I can get with a second coat here and there. Ideally I'd be doing this during the daylight so I could see the sun reflection, or I'd have more lights in here so that I could see my dry spots. But when I was cutting up under here, I pulled up a little bit of dirt. Try to make sure it's really clean under your radiator covers before you go sticking a brush under there. And when you're cutting, try not to cut all at the same length. Bring your brush out, like on this board, maybe out this far and then a little closer to the radiator. You just want to alternate it so you don't end up with like a line in your finish. I used to do this one summer vacation back in school with a flooring guy, and that was one of the tips that he had for me. Make sure you have plenty of ventilation, as I said. And I'm going to show you now how to apply with a lamb's wool applicator. I'm just working out of a 90-cent little paint roller tray. I forgot to get the actual stiff tray underneath, so, but it's working. I'm wetting my applicator with this finish, and then I'm taking, I don't want to talk too long because it'll get tacky. I'm trying to come up to where my line was and then just kind of roll the applicator back, and I'm dragging as I walk backwards. I'm overlapping my last line, and I can actually go right up to the wall because I have cut that in, and then I just kind of lift it and roll it off. So there's kind of a lift and roll at the end. But you want to make sure you have it good and your applicator good and wet, and then just pick up where you left off the last time. So I'm close to here, and I'm not going to be completely straight here because I'm holding the phone and I really should be holding the applicator, but I'm overlapping again, and then I'll just kind of work my way back into the stroke here and just gently roll it back to where I cut, and there you go. So it's looking pretty good. Again, this is the areas we haven't been, and this is the areas where we have been. So I'll get back with you in just a second. After I finish, I'll show you the final product. Okay, so here's the final product, just a minute or two after I've finished laying it down, so it still is drying. I don't see very many dry spots, but I'm sure there are some. Tomorrow I can put a second coat on it after it dries. I'll let it dry overnight with the windows open. But it looks a lot better than it did. It's not a perfect job, but again, it's a rental. You know, I'm sure over the years tenants will beat on this floor and drag furniture over it, so I'll have to do this again in another few years, I imagine. But for now it's good, it's shiny, and the tenant should be pleased with it. So it took maybe all of 10 minutes to do from start to finish, not including the sanding and vacuuming, which may have added another 20 minutes. Preparation is really important, of course. Make sure your floor is very clean before you paint, otherwise you'll end up with little bumps in the finish from the sand. The tack cloth is important, as that helps pull a lot of that up. So here's the floor with the first coat on. I'm going to be doing one more coat now, but just to show you it's dry. So before you put your second coat on, make sure it's dry. And you might want to go along and just look for any rough edges and just take a really light grit of sandpaper and just touch it up. Get the grit out and then tack it again and go for your next coat. And here it is after the second coat, which is going to be my last coat. There's a few dry spots, but because I have the first coat underneath it, I don't think it's going to be real obvious. But overall, I'm pleased with it. Again, it was only about 38 bucks, I think, for the can that I used of the floor urethane, and it was a good investment because this room looks a whole lot nicer with a glossy hardwood floor.